It started like any other high-stakes hearing. Cameras were prohibited. The press benches were packed. You could feel the tension, an undercurrent, sharp and electric. Pam Bondi stood near the plaintiff's table, her briefcase locked shut, her eyes fixed on Judge James Boasberg. The defense counsel whispered among themselves. The case, a routine matter on the surface, had gained attention due to a sealed exhibit, something no one could explain, not even court clerks. Then Bondi spoke. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I request that Exhibit C be unsealed. In light of new evidence, I believe this material is not only admissible, but crucial to the integrity of this court." Judge Boasberg's expression changed. Just a flicker. But it was there. A long pause followed. "I'll remind you, Ms. Bondi, Exhibit C was sealed by mutual agreement," he said cautiously. She leaned forward. "With all due respect, that agreement was based on incomplete information. I now have proof that the agreement itself was part of an undisclosed arrangement, one that compromises the neutrality of this court." Gasps rippled from the audience. Boasberg adjusted his glasses, voice tight. "Ms. Bondi, you're treading a dangerous line." "Then let the record show I crossed it willingly," she replied. She snapped open her case, producing a black folder marked confidential, Doge internal. The moment the court officer passed it to the bench, the room seemed to hold its breath. What was in that folder would shake the very foundation of judicial trust. Judge Boasberg flipped open the folder. His eyes scanned the top page, then stopped. Pam Bondi stood still, her face calm but resolute. She knew what was in there. Everyone did soon enough. "May I approach, Your Honor?" she asked. Boasberg didn't respond. His eyes lingered on the contents for several moments longer. Then, slowly, he gave a single nod. Pam stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor, echoing in the silent chamber like a metronome of impending collapse. She placed a printed exhibit on the edge of the bench. "That's a verified email exchange between your chambers and a private legal consultant working for Atlas Strategies Group. Dated 3 weeks before this case was even filed." Whispers broke out from the gallery. A few reporters scribbled so fast their pens nearly tore the paper. Boasberg's jaw clenched. These emails were not obtained legally. "Actually, they were," Pam said, her voice cold. "Through a whistleblower in the DOJ's Oversight Division. The metadata confirms their origin." She turned to the gallery, lifting the emails overhead for all to see. The top line was bold, "Don't worry. Once it hits my docket, I'll steer it toward a closed resolution. The last thing we need is this reaching the press, or Bondi. J.B." The courtroom didn't just fall silent. It froze. Even the bailiff lowered his hand from his earpiece. Pam continued, "The man you trust to uphold justice promised a predetermined outcome before proceedings even began. And now, I'm officially entering this into the record." Judge Boasberg looked down, lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. For a full 10 seconds, the silence in the courtroom was so deep, you could hear the air conditioning humming behind the walls. Judge Boasberg didn't move. His hand hovered over the folder like it weighed more than it should. His face had turned pale, one of those pale shades not from fear, but calculation. Then, a faint shift. The bailiff, stationed near the bench, made a subtle movement. His hand hovered just near the emergency intercom. Pam caught it instantly. "I wouldn't," she warned gently. "That folder's contents are already archived. 5 copies. 5 cities. If anything happens to me, or this proceeding, they go live." The bailiff froze. Reporters had abandoned their notepads, several were quietly recording audio on hidden phones. Even the defense team, until now dismissive, leaned forward with wide eyes. Judge Boasberg finally spoke, but the steel was gone from his voice. "Ms. Bondi, this court does not operate on threats." She smiled slightly, but not warmly. Neither do I, Your Honor. Just facts. That email chain. It's not alone. There are call logs. Calendar entries. Payments that never reached disclosure filings. She tapped her folder. All pointing to one thing, a secret deal designed to bury this case before it ever breathed. Judge Boasberg turned to his clerk. Clear the courtroom. Now. No, Pam said, louder now. Let them stay. Let them witness what accountability looks like. That's the only way this ends right. His gavel was halfway up, but he didn't drop it. The power in the room had shifted. And everyone knew it. The gavel trembled in Judge Boasberg's hand, caught mid-air like he was trying to reclaim authority that had already slipped away. But Pam Bondi stood firm. If you strike that gavel, the motion I'll file next won't be about ethics, it'll be criminal in nature. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Boasberg didn't move. Instead, he slowly set the gavel down on the bench, his fingers tightening around the handle before releasing it. Pam stepped back, eyes locked on him. You weren't just aware of Atlas Strategies' involvement. You signed off on a private mediation strategy before this case was ever scheduled. One of the defense attorneys stood abruptly. Your Honor, sit down, Boasberg snapped, louder than intended. All eyes darted to him. A crack in the facade. Pam held up a second page. This is a calendar invite from your DOJ liaison, referencing a quiet resolution dinner, with Atlas's general counsel, 2 days before the first motion was filed. She paused. You've got two options, Judge. Recuse yourself and refer this to judicial oversight, or watch me file a full judicial complaint in open court, with the evidence projected on that screen. She nodded toward the AV monitor in the corner. A beat passed. And then something nobody expected, Judge Boasberg slumped slightly in his chair. The kind of slump that doesn't come from exhaustion, but resignation. I need a recess, he muttered. You'll need more than that, Pam replied. The courtroom doors stayed open. But everyone knew a door had just closed on Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg exited through the side door without another word. The second he disappeared, the courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in urgent, breathless chatter. Reporters scrambled out of the gallery to call their editors. Phones lit up. Keyboards clattered. But Pam Bondi didn't move. She turned slowly to face the courtroom. Her voice was low but carried through the space like a drumbeat. For those wondering, yes, I expected retaliation. And yes, I have already filed preliminary disclosures with the Senate Judiciary Committee. A sharp gasp came from someone in the back row. Pam continued. This isn't about political sides. It's about process. Trust. And the rot that takes hold when even one courtroom becomes a personal playground for private deals. The defense attorneys remained seated, silent now. No objections. No motion to strike. Then, from the left side of the room, a soft voice spoke up. One of the junior clerks, barely out of law school. Ms. Bondi, was this why the previous hearing was postponed without explanation? Pam looked at her. Exactly that. The rescheduling was orchestrated to allow a private strategy to move ahead, one that never involved the parties, never passed through legitimate channels, and certainly never belonged in any courtroom. Just then, the side door opened again. But it wasn't Boasberg. It was a pair of U.S. Marshals. The room turned. Every neck craned toward them. Pam straightened. The taller marshal walked forward, spoke in a level tone, "We've been asked to escort Judge Boasberg to a secure location. In the meantime, per protocol, the court is suspended until further administrative review." One of the marshals looked at Pam. "Ms. Bondi, we've been informed to expect federal inquiry within the hour." She nodded once. The moment had arrived. And this courtroom would never be the same again. As the marshals left, the weight of the moment hung thick in the air. People weren't just witnessing a scandal, they were witnessing a shift. Pam gathered her documents calmly, but her eyes swept the room like a prosecutor already laying out her closing argument. No theatrics. Just precision. Then, a voice called from the gallery. "Ms. Bondi, you're not the only one with files." Heads turned. A man in a gray suit stood up. Mid-30s. Quiet until now. From the way the marshals immediately tensed near the doors, it was clear someone had been watching him too. "I worked inside Atlas," the man said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "For almost 5 years. I saw the deals. I saw the memos. And I saw the names. Boasberg isn't alone." Pam raised an eyebrow. "Name?" "David Penn, Senior Legal Analyst. Until 2 weeks ago." The name landed hard. A few people gasped. David Penn was listed in court filings before, but never as a source. He pulled a slim flash drive from his coat. "This contains the off-record communications Atlas had with multiple federal judges. Not just Boasberg. If you've got a safe route for chain of custody transfer, I'm ready." Pam didn't flinch. She turned toward the AV technician at the back. "Is the projector ready?" A nod. Pam gestured to Penn, "Then let's show them what justice looks like when no one's pulling the strings behind closed doors." The screen lit up. And what followed in that courtroom didn't just end a career. It ignited an investigation. The lights dimmed slightly as the projector warmed up. The first image filled the screen, a spreadsheet labeled Judicial Outreach, Phase 2. Names, dates, code words. At the top, Atlas Strategies Group Internal, eyes only. Gasps echoed through the room again. Pam Bondi stepped aside and let David Penn take the center floor. He scrolled down, clicking methodically. "This," he said, pointing to the screen, "is a breakdown of communications Atlas maintained with various federal officials, some judicial, some administrative, tracking their leanings, their vulnerabilities, and their price." No one moved. "No one was supposed to see this," he continued. "It wasn't just lobbying. It was influence orchestration, targeted campaigns to push favorable outcomes in select dockets." He advanced to the next slide, an internal memo stamped with Boasberg's initials. "Confirmed, JB on board. Formal narrative secured. Bondi flagged for interference, neutralize legally or discredit through media proxies." The courtroom fell dead quiet again. Pam spoke into the silence. They didn't just prepare to obstruct justice. They anticipated accountability, and planned to shut it down. One of the jurors, though technically dismissed for the day, was still in the gallery. She stood up, visibly shaken. "Is this, even legal?" she whispered. Pam turned to her. "No. It's not. And as of now, the Department of Justice has full access to this drive." David Penn handed a second copy to the marshal in the room. The chain of custody had begun. And the screen wasn't done yet. The next slide. A bank transfer. Judge Boasberg's initials. A Cayman account. The courtroom didn't just fall silent. It trembled. The Cayman transfer wasn't small. It was $175,000. Labeled as a consultation fee. Routed through a shell firm tied to Atlas Strategies. Dated 8 days before Boasberg's first procedural ruling on the case that had started it all. David Penn didn't need to explain it. The implication was crystal clear. But then came the next slide, and it was worse. It wasn't a document. It was a video. Pam looked surprised too. She hadn't seen this. Penn spoke carefully. "This recording was taken during a private retreat in Aspen. Atlas held a judicial access summit under the guise of a legal reform seminar. I was instructed to log attendance. What I captured was not part of any legal seminar." He hit play. The video showed a room full of men in suits, laughing around a fire pit, drinks in hand. One of them turned toward the camera. It was Judge Boasberg. Standing beside him, a sitting senator. The gallery erupted. Pam stepped forward. Pause it. Pen hit pause. There, frozen on screen, was a high-resolution shot, Boasberg, laughing. The senator beside him, holding a folder marked Confidential, Judiciary Affairs. And in the background, unmistakably, was another figure. Pam squinted. Her jaw clenched. That's a White House legal advisor. Now the entire room knew. This wasn't just a rogue judge. It was part of something bigger. The courtroom had transformed into something else now, less a legal proceeding, more a national revelation. As the image lingered on screen, you could hear nothing but shallow breathing and the occasional click of phones being silenced, not turned off, but silenced. No one wanted to miss a second of what came next. Pam Bondi stepped forward, voice sharper now. This isn't just judicial misconduct. This is a coordinated abuse of the legal system from the inside, lobbyists, judges, and lawmakers colluding to fix outcomes for private interest. She turned toward David Penn. How long did this go on? Over 3 years, he said. Longer than I was comfortable knowing. The courtroom doors opened again. A woman in a dark pantsuit entered briskly, no press badge, no hesitation. She moved straight toward Pam and leaned in. A brief exchange. Then Pam turned to the court. That was a federal liaison. As of 15 minutes ago, Judge Boasberg has been taken into protective custody pending investigation. A task force is being activated. She held up the flash drive. And this is just one part. What we uncovered in this courtroom is the tip of something sprawling. Something systemic. She walked to the judge's empty bench and placed the flash drive where Boasberg once Saturday. This court is temporarily closed, she said. But it just became the most important courtroom in America. She looked up, locking eyes with every camera, every reporter, every stunned citizen watching from the gallery. And let it be known, we're not done. By the time Pam Bondi exited the courtroom, the steps of the federal building were already swarmed. Reporters, cameras, federal agents, even off-duty staff had gathered. Everyone wanted confirmation of what they'd heard inside, that a sitting federal judge had been exposed in a covert deal involving a corporate strategy firm, a senator, and a White House legal advisor. Pam didn't flinch. She stepped to the microphones and spoke with the clarity of someone who came prepared for war. Today's revelations are not just about one judge. They're about the integrity of an entire system, and how close we came to losing it. She paused. But this time, we didn't. Inside, U.S. Marshals began sealing chambers. Electronic devices from Boasberg's office were being catalogued and boxed. Investigators were already working their way through the chain of communications David Penn had exposed. That evening, the Department of Justice issued a formal statement. A multi-agency probe was underway. The senator seen in the video? Gone dark. The White House legal advisor. Placed on immediate administrative leave. And Atlas Strategies. Their building in D.C. was surrounded by federal vehicles before midnight. But the most stunning shift came 2 days later, when 6 additional federal judges voluntarily recused themselves from unrelated but high-profile cases, citing conflicts of interest pending further review. The judiciary, for once, was on its heels. And at the center of it all stood Pam Bondi, unwavering. The media dubbed it the Bondi Break. Within 48 hours, headlines exploded across every network. Federal judge exposed in secret deal, chain of corruption unraveling. Whistleblower confirms multi-level collusion across judiciary. Bondi's evidence triggers unprecedented DOJ sweep. But behind the cameras, something more profound was shifting. Public trust, long frayed, was suddenly being recalibrated. In Washington, emergency briefings were held behind closed doors. A Senate Oversight Subcommittee launched a formal inquiry. Quiet phone calls buzzed between judicial districts nationwide. And the Office of the Inspector General, fully mobilized. Pam Bondi had become more than just a prosecutor, she was now the focal point of a reckoning. Back at her office, guarded by Federal Protection Detail, Pam reviewed a growing stack of messages, thank you letters, intel drops, encrypted files from insiders emboldened by what they'd seen. David Penn remained under temporary protection too. His testimony had already been requested by 3 separate committees. Meanwhile, one name kept popping up in the documents now flowing in, a second judge, from a neighboring circuit. Pam narrowed her eyes. What's the connection? She asked, sliding the files toward her aide. He hesitated. Same dinner. Same project code. Same hidden back-channel payments. Pam leaned back, her voice low. Then Boasberg wasn't the only one. He was just the first. She stood. Get the team ready. We go back to court. 1 week later, Pam Bondi stood once again before a packed federal courtroom, this time in a neighboring district. No longer a whistleblower. No longer just a prosecutor. Now, the face of a rapidly expanding investigation that had shaken the very pillars of judicial power. Behind her sat a new team of federal agents and independent auditors. In front of her, a different judge, nervous, cautious, and freshly assigned after the quiet recusal of the one originally set to hear the case. Pam addressed the court. This isn't about politics. This is about power used in the shadows, behind closed doors, under sealed dockets, through favors disguised as protocol. She held up another black folder. Inside, documentation connecting yet another federal judge to the Atlas network. Another payment trail. Another concealed deal. But something was different this time. There was no resistance. No objections. No gavel slammed in defense. Just silence, and submission. The courtroom, and the country watching it live, had reached a turning point. Pam placed the folder on the bench. The justice system doesn't fix itself. It requires friction. Exposure. Accountability. She turned toward the cameras. And now that the first domino has fallen, we're not stopping until the last one does too. Outside, news alerts were already breaking, more resignations. A full Senate probe approved. Atlas Strategies shuttered pending investigation. Boasberg's legal license suspended indefinitely. History would remember it as the day the courtroom didn't fall apart, but finally stood up. And at the center of it all was a woman who refused to stay silent. Pam Bondi.